and doing that even when it's uncomfortable, and doing that even when like change is really hard, just in general. Like we all know that, change is not something that most people willingly walk into, but I think as a field, the more capable that we are of embracing change, the better off we're going to be. And so the question that stuck out to me the most was about the future of higher education, and if I think there needs to be a significant change in the way that we view international ed or higher ed. And I have been working in education for 10 years. I have a really varied background. I taught English abroad in South Korea right after undergrad, and then I was actually a teacher for 2 years in Minneapolis in the K-12 system, and feel very strongly about equipping young people for the future and the future of the changing world. So my background's really varied. Like I said, now I work with Via TRM, which is a startup technology company based in the field. And I think in my current role, I'm thinking a lot about not only the future of international ed and higher ed, but just the shifting future and uncertain times in general. Something that I think about quite often, actually, is the changing landscape of information. So like I mentioned, I'm a marketer, and part of my role is sort of to know what's going on in the field and outside of the field, and bring information in from outside of the field for dialogue and consideration. And I was actually reading recently about Buckminster Fuller, who's one of my heroes, who is an architect and a futurist, a real design thinker. He had this concept of, it was called the, I wrote it down so I can remember it, the knowledge, so Buckminster Fuller has this concept of the knowledge doubling curve, which basically is a theory that he came up with that says, up until the 1900s, basically, information doubled just about every century. That was, for all of humankind. And then after World War II, information started to double every 25 years. And we are now, in 2019, in an era when IBM actually recently published something on this, where they say information is doubling about every 13 months. But with the Internet of Things and just the amount of data in the world, that is expected to change to every, what did they say? Oh yeah, so with the Internet of Things, they're saying that is going to change to every 12 hours in the very near future, which is mind-blowing, right? It's like actually mind-blowing. So all that to say, I think the growth of knowledge and information in the world is basically unprecedented. And as educators, part of our role is to think about how do we equip students in that world and how do we prepare them. And higher ed is sort of notorious for being slow. And I think that's in no small part because we have very large systems that have been in place for a really long time. So I also draw a lot of inspiration from thinking about design thinking and how we can better design our education systems to suit students. I have also been learning more about this concept of digital transformation, which actually is something that, again, sort of pulling from corporate America, where they, some might argue have more resources and time to test out things. There's a new executive level role that's emerging, which is a digital transformation leader. And one example of this is looking at a company like Netflix. I don't know if you remember when Netflix first started off, they were and this was when I was in high school, they were a DVD by mail company. Right. So my family totally used it, and it basically was like you would go online, or you could call and you would order the DVD, and then it would get to your house. And their main competitor, of course, was Blockbuster at the time, right, which had brick and mortar stores. And They basically, created this whole marketplace where they were mailing DVDs direct to consumers. And not too soon, I think they were founded in like the mid 90s. Um, and they basically built innovation into their company from day one. They had a lot of designers sort of leading the way and thinking about how to remain flexible and have the opportunity to basically be like an agile company. So they were able to shift into what we all know today, which is Netflix streaming direct to your home. And their main competitor, which was much bigger, like had way more resources, completely went under. Like I haven't seen a Blockbuster store, right, in the past like decade, basically. But the reason that they were able to do that is basically because of the way that they designed their company to test out their assumptions, to iterate, to try again if they failed, and they were able to just kind of like keep up with the times. So I think about that example, which again is coming from the private sector, but it inspires me to know that. And one of the things that actually one of the founders of Netflix talks about is that it is not about resources, money, even people necessarily when you're thinking about transformation, but it's really more about a mindset. It's about shifting your mindset and being open to change. And for me, that is my hope for higher education, for K-12, for international education, is that we are able, and I think there are, of course, people doing this, right? And I think I want to see it happen on a bigger scale. But my hope is that we're able to test out our assumptions, take risks, try new things, think about efficiency, kind of the things I was touching on, like thinking about what does this next generation need, meeting students where they're at, and doing that even when it's uncomfortable, and doing that even when like change is really hard, just in general. Like we all know that, change is not something that most people willingly walk into, but I think as a field, the more capable that we are of embracing change, the better off we're going to be. And thinking about IIE Centennial, like there was a comment the other day about like, oh yeah, what's the next 100 years look like? And I was sort of imagining like if there were like folks from IIE who were here 100 years ago when the organization was first founded, like they would be like, whoa, you've gone through a transformation. You're so different from where we were 100 years ago and what we were focused on. And I think that is possible, but only, of course, through intentionality. Like I don't think change just happens by chance. I think it's very purposeful.